Stagnant economic growth and persistent structural issues have led to a jobs bloodbath in various sectors, and made worse by the increasing exit of multinational companies out of South Africa. Companies including Goodyear Tyres, ArcelorMittal, Murray and Roberts are shutting down, leading to massive job losses. Ford is also implementing retrenchments with about 500 jobs on the line. Employment and Labour Minister Nomakosazana Meth says this is a concern, saying the imposed US tariffs have worsened matters. The minister was urging companies in need of support to reach out to a department for assistance. And as a follow on the latest statistics, which painted a grim figure of job losses, we have brought in a panel to discuss this challenge. Our reporter in studio, Black Business Council CEO Khanki Matabane, South African Federation of Trade Unions General Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi, as well as Labour analyst Patrick Deal. Gentlemen, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Perhaps, Katlaho, let me start with you because we're sitting right next to each other. I mean, you've been covering and monitoring mass retrenchments over a period of time now as they highlight the major crisis. And, you know, as you interact with businesses, interact with workers who are affected, what have some of your findings been?
Well, a very good evening to you, Mpo, and to our viewers at home. One thing that I must say is that over time, you get a sense of anxiety being the order of the day for both employers and employees. Because as we see the country navigating a stagnant economy, we see a lot of companies having to tweak and try to, more or less find ways to keep afloat. So most of them would implement the Section 189s, which would be retrenchments, and really just trying to move with the economy in trying to really navigate what is there. And most of them, you get a sense, Mpo, that also they've been looking towards government to come through for them in terms of what would need to be done here. Labor unions alike have been inundated with just, negotiations, trying by all means to safeguard the work, the job security. At the same time, just push government into trying to ensure that there are better wages for the workers, and exploitation is the last thing that would play itself out. Because as you find companies trying to move with the economy, you get a lot of workers just worried about exploitation, and some of them also worried about the vulnerabilities that will be presented by this economy. So here we're seeing not just local companies shutting their doors, but also multinational companies, those who would be investors that have been operating in the country for years, and some of them have started now feeling the pinch, and you get a sense that most of these issues would be structural, Mpo. And since the introduction of Operation Vulindlela, we've seen government saying that they're trying by all means to come through with these reforms. But you get a sense that these companies want those reforms to play out as a matter of urgency. But we see various of these companies battling under pressure, and the workers will be the ones that will be in the receiving end when some of these issues play themselves out.
In fact, let's rope in Mr. Zwelinzima Vavi of SAFTU, the General Secretary there. As my colleague Katlego Khodi speaks about the role of labor unions, how they are trying to safeguard jobs and looking at the vulnerabilities of workers. Perhaps talk to us about what SAFTU is doing on the ground to support workers affected by the recent retrenchments.
Well, we're doing our best to alleviate, to stop the bleeding, to make sure that we negotiate alternative to the retrenchments that the employers are putting on the table, to coordinate with the government, to sometimes with great pain ensure that the government puts money on the table, such as was the case in relation to the closure of AMSA in Vanderbilt and Newcastle, and to negotiating alternative employment in the Goodyear to ensure that another company takes over. So it's a busy time, it's a painful time. We're talking to the Department of Trade and Industry in relation to the retrenchment at SAB. We have approached them to speak to us about the retrenchment that are looming of 2002 workers at the poultry company. And it's hectic, but we are fighting a rear guard battle We are on the defensive, and we are doing the best that we can under conditions that are totally not of our choosing. But we're doing our best to avoid the worst. And sometimes we do not succeed to avoid the worst. For example, with our best intentions to support AGOA in relation to support even the subsidies that the government is providing to the motor industries, Mercedes have scaled down. Ford have announced that they're going to retrench 474 workers, and we don't know who's going to be the next.
Yeah.
Coca-Cola is closing down the plant in Port Elizabeth. It is going to be retrenching workers in Bloemfontein. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare that we are facing now.
Okay,
Yeah.
Perhaps let's bring in the Black Business Council, Mr. Matabane, as Mr. Vavi talks about a very crucial question. We don't know who is going to be next, which really raises chills as we look at the impact of multinationals exiting. How do you respond to the exit of these multinationals as the Black Business Council?
Good evening, Paul. Good evening to the panelists, and good evening to the SABC News viewers. We do have a crisis. We do have a crisis of unemployment. If you take people that are not looking for jobs, we basically have a 43% unemployment, which then makes almost half of the people who are supposed to be working are not working. Hence, you are seeing all these marches that may end up with the country being rendered ungovernable. It's not a far-fetched issue. We're sitting on a serious time bomb. And the economy is not growing. And the economy is not growing for various reasons. And as far as we are concerned, we were like 31 years into democracy, and in that 31 years, we basically failed to change the ownership of the economy from the 7% of the population. So the economy is managed, controlled by 7%, which then means 92% of the population are basically sitting there as spectators. And then in a country like that, you are not going to get the growth that you want, because the 92% of the people who are spectators, they're supposed to be also be consumers. They're supposed to be playing in the economy. They're not playing any role in the economy. They are basically sitting there and watching. So you can't have, in any country, you can't have 7% of the population basically carrying everyone. You should try by all means, which government has failed over the past 31 years, to bring the 92% into the economy, make them owners. Hence what we're saying, the target that government always comes, every state of the nation comes and say we're going to create 1 million jobs. It's a wrong target. The jobs are supposed to be an output of something, not sitting, giving speeches and you hope somehow, somewhere the jobs will come. There must be a plan. So that if you're saying, I'm going to create 1 million jobs, you're supposed to be the 1 million jobs are coming from something. And in our view, the 1 million jobs are supposed to be coming from saying, let me make sure that the 92% of the population own the economy. Let me use government institutions, the PIC, the IDC, all the funding institutions, to say, I'm going to fund 2 million small businesses. I'm going to fund 2 million black businesses. And even if 1 million of them fail, the other million will then be able to create the 2 million jobs that are there. The issue that Mr. Bavi has spoken about, for example, AMSA, there are black people who are trying to buy AMSA, but the government is not supporting them. There are so many black people who are trying to say, while these companies are facing all these challenges, who are staying here in South Africa, we were here, government used the funding institutions of government to fund us so that we can buy these companies and then we can save the jobs. We can localize a lot of things, but we're not getting that support from government. And while we're sitting, the reason why we're always saying government is because history, when you look at the history, the Afrikaners were supported by government. Government is very, very important in making sure that they support those who are marginalized. But unfortunately, our government, for some reason, have basically refused to assist.
In fact, it would have been the perfect opportunity, pardon me, sorry for the interruption, it would have been the perfect opportunity to have the Labour and Employment Minister Meth intervene at this stage, but unfortunately at the 11th hour we were dropped by that department. You raise really important points there. Perhaps let's move it to Mr. Deal. I mean, as we listen to what Mr. Matabane is saying about government's intervention and how, you know, there's a group of black businessmen who are interested in AMSA but unable to move forth with that idea because of a lack of support. How effective is the Department of Labour's intervention capacity as highlighted by Minister Meth's call for companies to seek support, but it doesn't look like it's coming through. It's coming through to bring some sort of solution.
I don't think it's been very effective at all, as my colleagues are saying. That there is a stalemate, particularly in relation to AMSA, but in other sectors of the economy as well. And I think, you know, when you hear those desperate cries of the people that we saw in the last clip, you know, in Rosslyn, demanding jobs and so on, particularly all of those young people with qualification, it just makes you cry to see that. And, you know, no wonder that there is the crisis, the ticking bomb. I know that Mr. Vavi is often referred to it as correctly as well. And it is particularly because of the youth. I mean, we have a whole generation of youth, you know, in their 20s and early 30s who constitute 60 to 65% of the unemployed. I mean, it's just undoable. The metrics that we are faced with are undoable. And so the problems are enormous and they can overwhelm us. And I think, you know, in broad strokes, if we think in terms of the idiom, you know, a rising tide raises all ships. What's happening now is that the tide is going out and the ships, in other words, the businesses, are becoming stranded and the employees in those businesses are finding themselves stranded without jobs. And so what we need to do is raise the tide. We need an incoming tide and not an outgoing tide, which is happening. So the burning question is, what was going to make the tide rise? And, you know, I think in broad terms, it has to be a partnership between government, labour and the private sector. And this is an emergency that needs to happen. We've talked about compacts in the past, and there is a really a useful institution, NEDLAC, that should be rolling their sleeves up, or could be rolling their sleeves up and really getting proper partnership together. I think the days of creating hostilities between labour and management and taking positions against each other, I think are in the past. Both parties, both sectors need to roll up their sleeves, and they can work together, and they've demonstrated how they can work together. And I think with some kind of public partnership, public-private partnership even is another way, an additional way to get the private sector involved with government, to assist government, and government to assist the private sector to gain entry and to gain traction to start raising the tide of the economy, to grow the economy. We cannot live in an economy with 1%, less than 1%, ticking over or just under 1% per quarter as it is now.
Yeah.
When the number of availability in labour is rising so greatly. And so I think the cry for government to create jobs is slightly misdirected. I think that the government can facilitate the creation of jobs, not create jobs itself. It can do in a number of ways. It can do so through creating an enabling environment. in which direct investment capital from external capital feels that this is a good place to invest their money. It's not as risky as in other countries where they can make a return if they come here. And secondly, that as my colleagues were saying, to invest money to support small businesses, young businesses, people, the youth, to be able to facilitate their own businesses, to provide services that are of value, that can create one by one businesses in their own rights or together, and they can create a network. The other way that the state it actually does provide jobs is in the civil service. In government institutions and all levels of government. So that's another way that they do that. But even that civil service, as we know, is under pressure. Yeah. And the last one is, of course, the public works programs, which are minimum entry, minimum wage kind of ways of doing things, of employment. But I think a missing point here too, which government could really get their hands on, is this infrastructure development. I mean, it's been on the cards for so long about this idea of R1 trillion, even more than that, investment in infrastructure. Because if you get investment in infrastructure to improve a delivery of services at all levels in society, from local level to provincial up to national, you will get an impetus for businesses to participate, to assist government to develop infrastructure improvements and so on. And that leads to other related services and so on. So infrastructure investment is really, I think, an important dynamic to create business and to create targets. Like, do you remember what we did with the 2010 World Cup? When it was all hands on deck, there was an emergency. We had to build all of these stadiums, and people just got on and did it and made it work. And we showed then how successful we can be.
Okay.
In a kind of
perhaps hold that thought as we move the conversation to my colleague here in studio, Katlego Logodi. We've just listened to the gentleman speak quite extensively about the role of government. I mean, that's come out very strongly. Yeah. You have interacted with Labour Minister Meth, and she's made a call for businesses who are, squashed in a hard place to come out and ask for assistance. Talk to us a little bit about what that looks like.
So you get a sense, Paul, that the minister is worried about all of these developments, the ballooning unemployment rate in the country. At the same time, as we are looking at the quarterly labor force survey giving us a grim picture, you get a sense of companies now shutting their doors. Yep. So it's really been a race against time to try address both of these issues. She's saying that she's meeting regularly as the economic cluster ministers to try by all means to address the structural issues. So you get a sense that what she is doing would get affected by, for instance, what is being done by the Department of Employment and Labor in terms of the Department of Electricity and Energy in terms of the efforts that are being done there. For the longest of time, you get a sense that these companies have been navigating hard times linked to the lack of electricity. Now we have electricity, but they are worried about the price of this electricity, that it's expensive, and most of these companies are not able to make ends meet. There have been logistical issues. Mr. Deal spoke about the issue of infrastructure, to say that has been an impediment as well. How do we move the tide to ensure that we cushion these businesses that are navigating hard times? But you get a sense that the minister is worried that most of these companies really leave these matters till the last end, so until the last end, that's when they start approaching the ministry, when there's a labor unrest because there's a retrenchment announcement of some sort. And she's pleading to say we have institutions, as the Department of Employment and Labor, there's the CCMA that she says has been intervening and can intervene in helping companies to keep afloat. There's the UIF that can also come through to help these companies. If I take you back to COVID-19, there was the TESS scheme. So she actually speaks about it a lot to say that was not just a COVID scheme. It's one, avenue that we have had for the longest of time as the department but we are worried about companies just leaving all of these issues until the end, and then that's only when they come to the ministry bunkling under pressure. She has spoken about trying to intervene at ArcelorMittal in saving the institution and the company, and that did not come through. She's worried about some of these issues that are playing themselves out. For instance, Coca-Cola. For instance, you hear Glencore. If you hear Goodyear Tyres. So the list goes on and on and on. So you worry as to which company would be next in terms of some of these issues that have been playing themselves out. But you get a sense that she's worried.
Yeah. Let's maybe take this one to the BBC's Mr. Matabane. You spoke about, how AMSA is not winning when it comes to getting some backing from the Department of Labour. Do you think local black businesses are in a position to fill the gaps left behind by these multinationals? And with that question, perhaps what structural support do they need?
I think the biggest one is a legislation. So we've got the state procurement, and I'll give you a example. So we've got a few transformer companies, the companies that are manufacturing transformers in South Africa that are local, and because of the state procurement laws, Eskom is not able to buy transformers from them. They go and buy transformer from other companies in other countries, and basically create jobs there. While we've got companies here in South Africa that are in business rescue. So we should be reforming our own procurement laws to support localization, but we're not doing that. We're not beneficiating. There's too much talk and very, very little action. We've been talking about beneficiation for the past, 20, 30 years. But we have not even done a single thing to beneficiate. Instead, we mine all our ore, we export everything to other countries. They do the final product, they sell us at very, very expensively. And we're creating jobs somewhere else. So we need to come to a situation where we stop the talking and implement. The president, for example, so just the last quick thing. Talking about the state procurement, the president has signed a legislation called Public Procurement Act before elections. We're sitting now after 1 year after elections, the legislation is not implemented, mainly because National Treasury was supposed to finalize the regulations so that we can implement it, because that was going to allow people to do what is called set aside. So you can then say, if you are buying this transformer company that is a local company, we set aside the Eskom tenders to say you will buy from this company, so that we create jobs here in South Africa. But if we continue to export our minerals, import the finished products, we are never going to deal with this issue of unemployment, because the unemployment we're having is mainly people who are not skilled. So it's people who need to use their hands to work. So we need to then say manufacturing is one of the industry or the sector that can help us with that. And then again, on the AMSA thing, I was talking about not the Minister of Labour, I was talking about the black business people wanting to buy AMSA so that it doesn't close, it remains in the hands of locals and blacks. But we need money from PIC, we need money from the IDC to fund the black players. But that is not happening. We're going to let this die, and all the people who are unemployed, who were employed by AMSA, they will then be on the street. We're increasing on the 43% of unemployment that we have.
Okay, thank you so much. Perhaps, gentlemen, let me thank you for your time. We unfortunately have to leave it here. That was Black Business Council CEO Khanki Matabane, our reporter in studio Katleholo Khodi, South African Federation of Trade Unions General Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi, and Labour analyst Patrick Deal. Thank you for your time.